are older than Mena, because Mena was only just starting primary school then, and Luzanne teaches in a secondary lower school. And so, but Mena came along. She came along and she joined in all the activities, and she was doing really well. And we were actually planning to join the international young storytellers, but unfortunately, as we all know, things changed very suddenly and dramatically in October. But Luzanne is also David Heathfield's friend, and they've been in touch. And Luzanne wrote to David, I think, this morning, to say that one of Mena's dreams, who's now 9 years old, is to tell a story on the World Storytelling Cafe. So thank you for making this dream come true. Thank you to the World Storytelling Cafe, and to Walid, who's given me the powers, the sharing powers to do so. And here she is.
Started. Once upon a time, there was a bee. She loved flying between the flowers. She loved the colors. She loves the smell. She loves the sun. One day, the bee flying in the garden. She didn't see the angry man. The angry man put the glass with the bee. The bee cried, "Help! Help! Help me, please! Help! Help! Help me, please!" And nobody cared. She didn't have food, and she didn't have water. But she cried again. "Help! Help! Help me, please! Help! Help! Help me, please!" Neighbors hear the bee, and she say, free the bee, free the bee." The neighbors broke the cloth, and the bee, she flying again between the flowers. Bye.
Bye, Mena, and thank you for sharing that beautiful story. And thank you again for giving us the space.
Right, so how can you get back to Mena? Can you communicate with her?
Through her mum, yes, and I'm sure they'll be watching the recording later.
Right. Okay. Well, if they make it to the UK, they've got to come to Much Wenlock in Shropshire. We have a storyteller club and we have a storytelling festival, and she'd be very, very welcome. Okay.
I'll tell Mena and her mum. Thank you very much, Mike.
No, absolutely. There's that's a very interesting story she's telling there about the bee, and there's another version of that that goes back an awful long way. But I'm going to have a think about it to get it right.
Okay.
It really is. It's a story that's 2,000 years old, and it's about a bee. Okay.
Interesting.
Let me have a think about it. In fact,
it's nearly Earth Day, so get it ready for Earth Day on Monday.
Well, John is listening, and I think you probably know the version as well, John, I'm talking about. But I do this too often sometimes, man. I think something throws a story at me, and I know the story, and I don't think about it enough, and I just put it out. And I need to work on this one to make sure it's up to a level that I want other people to listen to. Okay, so after all this is happening, get hold of me tomorrow morning. I'll tell you the bare bones of the story, if that's the right expression. Then you can work on it as well. But I don't want to perform it in public. It's too important today to get it not to get it right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Absolutely right.
Thank you.
No, not a problem at all. And that is great. And it's work well done. It really is. Okay. And at some point, when all this is over and there's peace again in the world, we can all get together and tell stories again. And the sooner the bloody better, as far as I'm concerned.
And
Anyways.
Luzanne has a fundraiser, and if you don't mind me sharing the link and inviting everyone to contribute if they can, but if you can't, sharing is equally important for Luzanne and her family to get to safety. Thank you.
Absolutely, we'll share it through our social media platforms and everything else, which are quite extensive nowadays. Yeah, absolutely, we will do that. Right. Keith, because I know you and trust you so well, can I come to you next? After all that, then I'll come to Despina afterwards, if that's okay. Right.
Okay.
Keith from Lincolnshire, where it's flat and they don't have any hills apart from the one he sits on. He tells me every time.
Yes, I was out biking a couple of weeks ago, and I crossed a bridge over a stream or a brook, which you can see behind me. And it's at a place called Somersby, which is the village in which Alfred Lord Tennyson was born. And he created this poem called The Brook.
Okay.
I come from haunts of coot and hern. I make a sudden shally, and sparkle out among the fern, and bicker down a valley. By 30 hills I hurry down, or slip between the ridges. By 20 thorps a little town, and 100 bridges. Till at last by Philip's farm I flow, to join the brimming river. For men may come and men may go, but I go on for ever. I chatter over stony ways, in little sharps and trebles. I bubble into eddying bays, and babble on the pebbles. And many a curve my banks I fret, by many a field and fallow, and many a fairy fallen set, with willow weed and mallow. I chatter as I flow, to join the brimming river. Men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. I wind about and in and out, with here and blossom sailing, and here and there a lusty trout, and here and there a grayling, and here and there a foamy flake upon me as I travel, with many a silver water break above the golden gravel, and draw them all along I and flow, to join the brimming river. For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. I steal by lawns and grassy plots. I slide by hazel covers. I move the sweet forget-me-nots that grow for happy lovers. I slip, I slide, I gloom, I glance among my skimming shallows. I make the nettled sunbeam dance against my sandy shallows. I murmur under the moon and stars in brambly wildernesses. I linger by my shining bars, I loiter round my cresses. And out again I curve and flow, to join the brimming river. For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Yeah. It may have been written by him, but tonight it wouldn't have been read by him any better than you just read it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Despina. You got to find the right button. Yes. So we're putting a bid in to do a collaboration between the UK and Morocco and Marrakesh to do some storytelling from both sides, joining up the both festivals. And the heading and one of the themes we're going to have is joining under the stars or healing under the stars. So we need a person who knows a bit about the constellations and the stories that they tell. So your name happens to be in this bid because we know how much of an expert you are. I did think I'd better get round to telling you that we were going to putting you in, and if you make it, you're going to have to visit Shropshire and Marrakesh at various times over the winter and into the spring next year. So if you don't want to do it, now's the time to say no.
Well, I really don't want to, but I feel like I have to. So.
Oh, by the way, we're paying you an awful lot of money to do it.
Wow, well, that makes things easier, I should say. I'm not in it for the money, Mike. You know better than that.
Well,
but look, what an incredible coincidence, because we are writing an application for a European grant from the European Union with a friend of mine who is a guitarist and a singer, and we have this concept, because mythology is a huge area, you have to narrow it down. So we have narrowed it down to constellations. And in 2 days' time, we're going to apply for the grant. So wish us luck. If everything goes well, next year in 2025, we'll be in Malaga, Spain, telling to high school kids about constellations.
Yeah. Right, well, that'll be after you get back from the desert in Morocco, okay? And a really nice pub in Much Wenlock called the Georgian Dragon, where we tend to hang around, okay?
I remember Georgian Dragon, I remember that pub, yeah.
Absolutely. The roof was so low, you were too tall for it, okay?
Okay, great, awesome. Well, here's the thing. I've been going over some of the constellation stories in order to pick some of them for our project. So the one I'm going to share with you today, this is how stories work. They're magical. They just put things and people together. It's going to be about constellations. So back in the beginning of Zeus's adventure, when he had kidnapped the beautiful girl that Europe was and taken her in the form of a bull all the way above the water down to the Isle of Crete, he gave her some, let us call them marital gifts, among which there was this great hound called Lelaps. The Lelaps was one of the fastest hounds ever. She was swift and she was never to miss prey. So Europe had 3 sons. Zeus fathered 3 sons by her. One of them became probably the most famous king of the island of Crete. His name is Minos, and a whole civilization has been named after him. But you see, Minos was kind of, let us put it this way, he had taken after his father. He was really into ladies, and having had several adventures, he probably got something, no kids here tonight, yeah? Cool, venereal. So there was this problem, and the lady started avoiding going to bed with Minos, and this just wouldn't do for the king. But there was this Athenian princess, Procris was her name, who was very well educated into herbs and remedies and therapies. So she was summoned and she traveled all the way to Crete, and indeed she managed to cure King Minos from what seemed to be an incurable disease. So feeling all grateful, he gave the dog Lelaps to her to take with her back home. So Lelaps traveled from Crete to Athens. And when it was time for the Athenian princess to marry, she chose Kephalos to be her groom. Kephalos came from the Ionian Sea, from one of the islands, so as it was custom in that age and era, she took her dowry and moved to the Isle of Kefalonia with him. But Kephalos, even though he did love his wife dearly, was spotted by a goddess, Eos, we call her in Greek. The name means dawn. He was spotted and targeted by Eos, and Eos took him with her all the way to the east, and there she kept him as a prisoner, a lover. However, even though they did spend some years there together, he was always longful to return to his home and his wife. He never stopped loving his wife. And finally, it seems that Eos just gave up waiting for him to love her back as much as she loved him. So she told him, I will let you go. I will let you return to your wife. But don't you think there for a minute that after all these years, Procris will be the faithful wife you imagine her to be? And even though Kephalos was sure of his wife's affection and faith, he did start getting worried. So with Eos whispering in his ear, he devised this plan. So he did return back to the island of Kefalonia, where Queen Procris was reigning without her husband, and she hadn't replaced him, which was good to know, but he went in disguise. He dressed himself as a rich merchant, and he started having several commercial affairs with the people of the island, so he would make a name for himself. Everybody would know he came with wealth. So when that was done, he started flirting the queen. And he promised her things. And at first he wouldn't even want to hear about it, but night after night he kept insisting, and he kept offering awesome presents to her, jewelry and you name it, until one night she agreed to take him into her chambers. And when that time came, well, you can imagine, he revealed himself. He took the disguise off and started accusing her of being unfaithful to him, which was honestly quite frustrating for Procris, with him having been gone for several years. But you know, these were really patriarchal times, so it didn't get them anywhere. He just claimed that she would just fall for the first rich guy that she would come to meet, and this would not do for him. So instead of returning back to his home and to her love, and even though it had been him all along she would be sleeping with, well, he just gave up. But Procris didn't. Procris really wanted her husband back. And she knew that Kephalos was a hunter, and she knew where he would go hunting. So now, this is very Shakespearean, really. It was her who disguised herself into the form of a boy. So she presented herself as another hunter, and she started hunting where Kephalos would go hunting, and she had that hound with her. Well, as Lelaps could never miss prey, she became one of the best hunters of the area, and Kephalos really wanted to know who this lad was that was competition for him, maybe even a better hunter than he was. And what about that hound? So they started hanging out together, rubbing shoulders and all, and Kephalos started making inquiries as to the state of the hound and whether that lad would be willing to sell her. But Procris, dressed as a boy, told Cephalus that she would only give that dog away to him as a present, not even sell it, not even for money, if he would spend the night with him. So this was like, he really wanted that hound. He really, really wanted that hound. And well, the boy looked quite good, to be honest. So, well, they did decide to meet at night. And when they did, I'm telling you, this is so Shakespearean. Now it was Procris who took off her disguise and started blaming her husband, Cephalus, that he would just sleep with anybody just in order to get a hound for hunting. So, several quarrels later, they put their egos aside finally and got back together as a marital couple that they were. But, well, once you lose trust, hard to go back to the first love you think you had. So even though they did get back together, even though Procris gave her husband that hound, she never really trusted him again. So whenever he would go out hunting, which was quite often, she would send her servant after Cephalus to have a watchful eye, and if you should find anything, devious going on, you should go back and tell her. So it was in one of those hunts that the weather was really nice, and it was early in the morning that Cephalus had started the hunt with his hound and his men, and it was getting rather quite hot because it was nearly noon now when he started calling out, "Nepheli, Nepheli," and the servant heard. And he went back to Procris and told her that husband of hers was calling out some Nepheli to go and meet him, obviously. What Procris didn't know, and in her insecurity failed to grasp, was that he was calling out at the great clouds called Nepheles, so that they would come, they would gather and protect him from the sun that was getting too hot. She had to find out for herself. So it was that she went, followed his trail, found where he was, and hid behind a bush. And when he started calling out Nepheli again towards the sky, she had to take a peek, so she tried to open up the branches and twigs and have a good look for herself to see who that Nepheli girl was. But all that Cephalus saw was the bush shaking, and to the hunter's instinct, that was prey. So he lifted up his spear and he let go, and through the chest of Procris it passed. And he heard the horrible human cry, and he rushed to the bush, and he found his wife there, but it was too late. Soon Procris left her final breath on his lap. So now he had to make atonements, but even though it had been an accident, it was very, very important for ancient people, ancient Greeks, to atone for their crimes, whether they were intended or not. In order to do so, he made a trip to a nearby city called Thyomissos. But that city had been plagued by a monstrous fox sent by Artemis, for they had failed to worship her. And that fox was ravaging the area. It would eat everything, even cattle, even large animals. So the king asked Cephalus that if he wanted to be atoned, he should do something for them. He should use his hound, the hound that would never lose prey. So Cephalus, who really wanted to be atoned for the unintentional murder, let go of his hound, which started to chase after Artemis's fox, the Thymisian fox. But you see, these two divine creatures went into a loop because the hound, Lelaps, was constructed in such a way that it could never miss prey. And the fox sent by Artemis, the Tunisian fox, it was constructed this way that it would never get caught. So they started chasing each other around in an endless cycle, which was devastating the area. And Zeus finally saw that this curse plaguing humanity would not stop until he intervened. So he used his divine powers and took the two animals from the surface of the earth and placed them up on the sky, where they appear to be. The grand dog. What is the dog's name in constellations? I do not recall. I remember Ursa, which is a bear. I don't recall the name of the dog. And you have the big dog and the little dog, but we know better. That's no little dog. It's the fox and the hound, with their eternal chase continuing up in the heavens. And that is my story for today.
So I have a question for you. Would that be the story that we call the Big Bear and the Little Bear?
No, that's another one.
That's another-
No. It's a canine major and canine minor. There's another two constellations that are similar, but not quite the same.
Major, okay.
Canis, probably. Yeah, Mike, you're right. I think it's Canis major.
Canis. Right. Right. Yes. Right. Cool. Yes. Lovely. Thank you very much. Obviously, we have the right person. But all we
I'm
have to
telling
do
you,
is to...
it is a universal conspiracy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Manuela, are you looking to tell a story yourself, or were you wanting, because you've done the one for Minna, which was just lovely, or are you wanting to do one yourself as well as?
Well, it depends on time because I have to leave in about 20 minutes, but I have a story I'm preparing for Earth Day.
Right.
It's not all, refined, but I'm happy to share it with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do a short one. You go next, and then Norman, if you've got one after that, and then Mike, if you're about, and I can see your face as Father Christmas, but nothing more than that at the moment. So I'll tell this one, which was, hang on, I need me reading spectacles for this. Canis Major and Canis Minor. Yes, yeah, that sounds right. Well, where I'm sat in Pershore here in Worcestershire, there's hardly a cloud in the sky. So perhaps we can go and have a look later. So there was a beach, and the beach was the most beautiful beach that anybody can ever think of. You close your eyes and you think of the beach that you most want to walk on as the sun comes up in the morning with bare feet. It was that beach. And it's all and you can be there because it's your beach and it's your vision with the ones that you love the most or the ones that you like the most. But there was a great wave, and the tide went out and the tide went back in. And as the tide came back in, it deposited about 100,000 starfish. And it had whipped them up from the ocean and it brought them all, and they all landed on the beach at the same time. And the little old lady I was talking about, she walked up and she picked one up and she threw it back into the sea. And she picked one up and she threw it back into the sea. And this fellow had come up from London, and he was a banker. And he turned round and he said, you know something? He said, I've seen what happened, but just picking one up isn't going to make a difference. Just picking two up isn't going to make a difference. The task is too big. There's nothing we can do. And he turned and walked away. And the little old lady, she turned round and she said, well, and she picked one up and she threw it into the sea. And she said, made a difference to that one. And she picked another one up and she threw it into the sea. And she said, I made a difference to that one as well. And she picked a third one up and she threw it back into the sea. She said, that's three I made a difference to. And that's a start. And that came from an old fellow you've heard of, some of you will have heard of, and some of you have talked to, was a fellow called Duncan Williamson. He lived up in the Highlands of Scotland. And he told me that. And he was sober when he told me that one. He didn't tell me many stories when he was sober, but he told me that one when he was sober because it was 8 o'clock in the morning. It might have had something to do with him picking up a glass of whiskey, but we won't go into that. Manuela, if you've got a story, I'd be lovely for you to tell it to us.
Thank you, Mike. That was lovely. And thank you for remembering Duncan. I think we've all, I had the pleasure of meeting him when I was a young girl at the Fringe in Edinburgh.
Well, his son Jimmy is coming down to our festival this year.
Wow.
Jimmy is probably up in his 60s now, and he's of the travelling kind still, and he's coming down to Much Wenlock for the festival in October. I was talking to him a couple of days ago. Jimmy and I know each other. We're acquaintances. I don't know him as well as I know Duncan, but we have met in the past. And the same, and some of his other children, my children know. Jake was talking about Tom and Betsy the other day. But so Jimmy's coming down to be with us. So if you happen to be in Much Wenlock in October, he'll be there. So.
You'll have to send me the details of the festival.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, come along. Yes.
I will. Okay, so this my story is in remembrance of a lady called Amrita Devi, an Indian woman who was very brave in protecting the trees of her land. And this is from her, these are her words. If a tree is saved, even at the cost of one's head, it's worth it. And nearly 280 or so years ago, the sacrifice of Amrita Devi had ripple effects in one of India's most vibrant environmental movements called, you may have heard of it, the Chipko Andolan. Chipko means hugging. And in fact, it's become known as the Hugging Tree movement, Chipko. Amrita, she belonged to the Bishnoi community that is known for the great love for conservation. And Bishnoi faith respects the sanctity and sacredness of all forms of life. And their tenets include prohibition. So it's prohibited to kill animals and to fell green trees. They also, of course, worship the Kerjri tree, Prosopis cineraria, considered a critical life force in these desert communities. So this is a bit of background, just in case you are not familiar with the Chipko movement. And so here is how the story goes. Once, not twice, not 3 times, but once upon a time, the king of Jodhpur sent his soldiers to the Bishnoi's village to cut green trees to build his new palace. As the soldiers began cutting the Kerjri trees with their axes, Amrita Devi, a Bishnoi woman, ran to stop the felling. She hugged the Kerjri tree to protect it from the blows and begged the soldiers to stop. The soldiers asked for a bribe to stop the cutting, but Amrita Devi was unmoved and told them that it was an insult to her faith to offer a bribe. The soldiers took to violence and struck her with an axe. When her 3 daughters witnessed the brutality, they rushed and hugged the trees as well. And they were also killed by the soldiers. Soon the word spread like a fire around the village of Kajali, and others joined in. Women from other villages came, and they all started hugging a tree. Village from village, women ran to the trees and hugged them in a non-violent protest. The soldiers continued merciless killing people, both young and old, and the massacre led to the sacrifice of nearly 363 Bishnoi people who died protecting their beloved sacred trees. Now, when the king learnt about what was going on, what was happening, he was repentant and forbade any killing of animals and of cutting of trees in the Bishnoi territories. Even to this day, one can spot the endangered black buck, peacocks, and other wildlife, and the trees are covered where the Bishnois communities live in Rajasthan. So it's no wonder that the Bishnoi are considered as among the earliest conservationists in the world. I'm not sure if I pronounced that word right, Mike. And a song from the Chipko movement in India recites, "Soil is ours, water is ours. Ours are these forests. Our forefathers raised them. It's we who must protect them." Thank you for listening. And the Chikmo movement still exists to this day. And it's a great example of a Gandhian movement that was based on non-violent principles.
It's a lovely story, and thank you very much, Mariana. So if you come to the part of the world I'm sat in, because I'm sat on the River Avon, which is the Stratford-on-Avon, which goes from down to Tewkesbury, where it meets the River Severn. And in 1066, we all know that William the Conqueror came over and he conquered this land, and he's known to this day as William the Conqueror. But there were 7 people in his little gang, and one of them he made the Duke of Gloucester. And he made he's a royal duke to this day, so the Dukes of Gloucester. And there's one in our present king, his uncle, and he's Duke of Gloucester, and he's one of the royal dukes that sits on his horse as he's going down the mile at the coronation and all the rest of it. But one of his ancestors, going back to about the 1100s, said we need a new bridge over the River Avon as it joins the River Severn at a place called Tewkesbury. And he got on his horse one day and he came up and he found a grove of ash trees, and in the ash trees there were some hornbeam trees and some beech trees. And he said, "This will build my new bridge. Cut all these trees down, float them down the river, and build the bridge across the river. We need a new bridge across the river." And then turn round, and a little girl who was 12 years old, and she had bright red hair, they say, and she played a little penny whistle. She said, "You can't have these trees. These trees are my trees." And the Duke said, "Whose trees are these? I'm a Duke, and you're a little girl. So unless you're the daughter of the King of England, these trees are my trees and not your trees." And the little girl turned back to her and she said, "These are my trees. Let's see who sleeps first." And the Duke, he just shook his head and he ordered his soldiers to come up and his men to cut the trees down the next morning. He said, "I found the grove of trees at Twining, which is the next village up, and the one after that is Green. Cut those trees down to build my bridge." But he couldn't sleep that night. All he could see was trees and a little red-headed girl. For 3 nights he couldn't sleep. And in the end he went back, and at the end he found a little red-headed girl sat there, and she was sat in the same place, and she was playing a penny whistle. And she looked up and said, "Whose trees are these then?" And the Duke looked at her and said, where do you come from? She said, my dad lives in these hills. My uncle, he's a tree. And she disappeared. And the Duke wrote this down, and it's written down, and it's kept in a place called Sudeley Castle in Winchcombe. There's a story about one of the early dukes met a little fairy. And the reason we all know this story is that when he went back, he told all his soldiers, we're not having a wooden bridge. I have made the big decision because I am the Duke, he said. And he stood in the middle of the town of Winchcombe under what they call the Butter Market and said, we in Worcestershire and in Gloucestershire are going to have the first stone bridge. We're going to build a bridge out of stone, and we're not going to use any trees because probably the trees are best left where they are.
Oh,
They built the bridge. It's called St. John's Bridge. It's there to this day. I was down there a couple of weeks ago and I walked across it. We have a little boat, and some friends of ours have got it down there, and we walked across there to a pub, and it's called the Bear. And the Bear pub in Gloucestershire, Manuela, is the oldest pub in Gloucestershire. So how many builders do you know? Because even if they're building a bridge, every time that a builder finishes work, he goes to the pub and he has a couple of beers, and he sits in, whether they're Greek, whether they're Italian, whether they come from Lincolnshire, whether they come from Canada, all over the world, every builder I know always has a pint of beer on the way home. And the people who built that bridge did the same. So they built a pub first, then they built the bridge. It's called St. John's Bridge, and it's still here to this day.
St. John's Bridge. I remember that, Mike. Thank you for sharing.
Get yourself over here and I'll take it. It's been closed. It's just gone back and coming in. It's a lovely little place to go and see. And that's the story of St. John's Bridge, that is. Yeah. Okay. Right, Norman.
Hello. So many beautiful stories there, and there's one that I had chosen because it's an environmental story, and but there's another one I wanted to try because it involves. Can you hear this? I haven't done the settings for a penny whistle yet.
Yeah, no, I can hear you, Norman. Keep going.
Yeah, but can you hear this?
No, you need to go to audio settings and put on.
How do I get to audio settings?
Right. If you go to the left there where it says it's on the audio one, isn't it? So where you mute yourself and that.
Okay,
Or
it says
you go to
mute.
the
Where the
video,
microphone is.
where the microphone is. It's where your microphone is, and it's and it goes audio settings at the bottom.
Okay, because it's not giving me audio settings. It just says mute and not mute.
Yeah, that one.
That one. Yeah, go to the right where the little arrow is.
Oh, okay. So, select a microphone. Select a speaker. Audio settings.
Yeah, and then you want. Is it background and effects? No.
Original
Background.
sound for musicians, I think. You have
Yes.
to select original sound for musicians.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Then where would that
that's
be
what
on
we're
the
looking-
bottom?
Yeah, scroll down. Once you're in settings, you scroll down.
Okay. Automatically computer. I see sync, press, people who can unmute your audio profile. Oh, bother. Okay, then, I'm seeing it's advanced.
Advanced, well, I'm trying to follow where you are, but.
I can't find where I am now. So
And you go
audio,
to profile.
background effects, recording, statistics, so.
Oh, no. Go into audio. Go to audio.
Again, okay then.
You can see speaker, microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Go down, and
Oh,
it should be original sound for musicians.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what you're looking for. So under
I
audio
do-
settings.
yeah, I've been trying to do audio settings again, and not much luck on that one because
Right.
I'm
So it
reading the
says
wrong
audio.
thing.
When you go into audio, it says audio profile, and you go down, and the one up from the bottom is original sound for musicians.
Okay. Audio settings. Okay, I've gotten into the wrong spot.
Right.
Okay, then I'll just tell the story as it is. Because I'm not getting in the right spot. We're losing time anyways. Once a long time ago, and the world had just begun, there was no music in the world. But there were children. There always have been children. And the children were playing as children as always have done, making music of tag your it's your, and they'd make chase each other and laugh. And suddenly they heard from the forest nearby a strange, wonderful sound that they'd never ever heard before. It was a sound, we would call it a flute, but to them it was the most strange bird that they'd ever heard. And that sound of that bird was coming closer and closer and closer until at last they all ran away except for one little girl, because curiosity is stronger than fear. And as she heard that sound come closer and closer, she was hiding behind a bush, and she looked out from the bush and she peeked, and out of the forest came a little old lady, and she had a stick in her mouth. And from the stick came a wonderful sound of a bird or whatever that she'd never heard before. And she called out, "Grandmother, grandmother, how do you make that strange, wonderful sound come from that stick?" And she stopped and she laughed and said, "Little daughter, little granddaughter, this is not a stick, it is called a flute." "Oh," said the little girl, What a beautiful sound. Will you show me how to make this sound?" "Oh, yes," said the old woman, "if you know how to listen and pay attention." "Oh, I will, as children have always have since the beginning of time." And this time she actually did pay attention. The old woman showed her how to take the stick in her hands and to hold her fingers straight, to breathe. And a beautiful low sound came from that flute. And the girl said, "Oh, I'm playing music. It's wonderful." "You have a good beginning," said the old woman, "but I will show you more." The old woman showed her how to move her fingers over the holes, to breathe, and to make beautiful melodies. And from that flute, the little girl soon learned how to make all the music that the old woman knew. Children learned fast in those days. And when they were finished, the little girl said, "Grandmother, thank you for your gift of this music, but that is your music. How do I get my own music?" "Ah, that's a very wise question to ask," said the old woman, "and this is what you must do. You must go into the forest, deeper and deeper into the forest, and there you must find a place where you will listen. You must listen very carefully, for it is out of the silence that the music, your music, will come." "I will do that, grandmother." And the old woman gave her a gift of the flute, and she left this story and went into another. And the little girl took the flute, and she went into the forest. And she had gone deep, deep, deep in the forest once long ago. And in the middle of the forest there was a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a gray rock covered in green moss, and little flowers, purple flowers surrounding that rock. And a little girl sat on that rock and she listened. And from the silence, she heard the sound of a bird overhead. "That's my first sound," said the young girl. She listened some more, and she heard the sound of the wind in the leaves. "That's my second sound," said the young girl. And she listened and listened and listened, and off in the distance, just barely she heard the sound of a stream going through the rocks. And she said to herself, "That is my third sound." And she lifted the flute up to her mouth. She took a deep, deep breath, and she breathed into the flute, and her fingers moved over the flute and wove the sounds of the birds and the wind and the water into music, her own music. And she got up from that rock and she walked through the trees. She walked through the forest. She came towards her village, playing that music all along the way, her own music. And the children in the village heard that sound, and they were scared, and they all hid. But as I said before, curiosity is stronger than fear. And they all peeped from behind the bush or behind the door, up through a window, and they saw their friend walking through the village with a stick in her mouth, making that strange, wonderful sound. And they called out, "Sister, how do you make that sound come from that stick?" And she stopped and she laughed. Says, "My friends, this is not a stick. It is called a flute. And this sound is called music." And they all crowded around her and asked, "Can you show us how to make this music come from this flute?" She said, "Yes, I can do that, if you know how to listen and learn." And those children must have listened very well. They must have learned very well, for to this day, there is music everywhere in the world, coming from the forest, come from the cities, coming from the children. And that is how the music came into the world long, long ago.
Oh, well, thank you, Norman. Right. That was lovely, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to call it now because we've all had a go and everything else. Norman, I want you to hang on for a moment. So don't go away, just stay where you are. So I'll be back in a fortnight's time, which I think will be in May. The year is beginning to pass already. It is beginning to pass already. So it's lovely to have you all here and everything else. Despina, I'll send you an email telling you what we're doing and everything else.
Okay,
But
Mike, I don't know if you noticed, John told us to announce Marion Lipa for next Friday.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. My friend Marion, who is the most wonderful storyteller in the whole of the world, is doing her storytelling on Friday for the World Storytelling Cafe at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock UK time. Despina, which was it? Anyway, she's doing.
It is 6 o'clock UK time, yes.
6 o'clock UK time. She is married to an absolutely lovely fellow called Finbar, who's a professor at Cambridge University, and she tells wonderful stories, and it'll be a fascinating experience, and you've all got to go. Okay? And that's all I know at the moment to do with the Storytelling Cafe. Thank you for everybody for your lovely poems. That's from Manuela. Manuela, I'd love for you to come over in October and meet Duncan's son, Jimmy. He's a lovely old lad. I can say that because he's just about the same age as me. Right.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you all in a fortnight's time. Okay. All right. And Norman, just wait a moment and unmute yourself and just wait a moment. Okay, mate.
See you in a
Goodbye.
fortnight.
Goodbye.
I love that term. We don't use it here.
What's that?
We don't use the term fortnight. I learned it from reading British books.
Okay, 2 weeks time. Right.
Yeah,
So you go.
no, I know what it means, but I like the sound of it better than I say, "See you in 2 weeks."
Right. Okay. So what you're going to do is to follow me. You're going to go down to where it says mute, and there's a little arrow to the right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, then to the right.
What's that? Right. So get down to the very bottom of what's come up, and it says audio settings.
Audio settings.
At the bottom, yeah. Press that.
It's now clicked on.
Yeah. Okay, and it comes up. Okay.
Right.
Right. Now you go down. It says speaker and microphone, audio profile, and then it goes original sound for musicians.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Original sound, Kate.
Press on that, and it will come up blue.
Right.
Press the 3 underneath. High fidelity music, echo cancellation, and stereo audio. Okay.
Okay. Okay. High fidelity
Right.
and echo cancellation.
Right. And then underneath it says live performance audio.
That had already been on before, and I've been thinking.
Right, so that's wrong, actually. So you've got to go back to original sound from musicians and press that and just leave it, okay? You want
Okay.
original sound for, okay? So then you go to the right, to the very top right-hand corner, where it's a little red cross on it, it says close. You close it, and above
Right.
you, it should say original sound from musicians, and it should say on, okay?
Okay. Well, I've just closed it off. Just let me try this. Did you get anything?
No, go again. No, it's not working. You've got to go up to the top, right? Go up to the top where it says live. To the left, it should say original sound musicians.
Yes, it does. Oh,
Does it?
original sound. For some reason, it says off.
Right, press it. Just press it with your right. Put the arrow on it and press it.
Okay, now it says original sound on.
Right, try it again.
Musicians.
Try it again. There you go.
Beautiful. Okay, just one last little detail I wanted to tell people, but I didn't. I want to tell you the part about the girl in the middle of the forest where she's sitting on a rock. Well, a long time ago, there was a place in the woods next to my house where there was a clearing with very much like that. And I only saw it the one day. When I went back the next time, it had been bulldozed.
Oh, okay.
So it's one of those things but it lives for me. It lives on in that story. Okay, thanks very much. Okay.
No, lovely to see you again, and I hope to see you over in the season this year or in Morocco.
I'm hoping. Yeah, I've got plans to put in proposals to the Canada Council for the Arts, but I have to be able to. I think be able to say that I'm going to a certain place like Morocco, and I'm not too sure if I have a verbal but not a written. And Canada Council doesn't take verbals.
Well, there's nothing more than nobody's got a verbal at the moment because they haven't really organised the festival. We're doing this
Yeah.
great big bid, which is a collaboration for the British Council, and so
Yeah.
we've got our towels wrapped around our heads. We're doing
Oh,
that.
the British Council. Okay, then. Well, hopefully we'll be able to have the Canada and the British together. Canada, the Storytellers of Canada, we do have some plans on some sort of collaboration between the UK and us.
Well, we'd love to do that, and we'd
Yeah,
love to be involved.
and I'm on the board, so I know that it can go somewhere. Right now, it's all words and hopes, so we'll see what happens.
Well, that's right. We're putting the bid. We've got a very strong bid, and we're just putting it together on Tuesday, Wednesday this week. It's got to be in by the end of April, so I've been doing it all this month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
All right,
give my
lovely to
regards
see you
my
again,
favorite
mate.
part of England. So take care.
And
Bye-bye.
you take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.